Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thank you so much for being here. Thursday, January 23rd. Obviously, it's been a whirlwind of a 24, 30 hours here in Jacksonville. Had freezing temperatures, had snow on the ground, had Trent Baalke fired. Some folks talking about hell actually froze over, and that's what led Shad Khan to finally make that move, a move that should have been made weeks ago, years ago, for that matter. Trent Baalke was always going to be an impediment to a coaching search, to hiring the best possible coaching candidate you can find, and ultimately average to below average when it comes to putting together a roster. So it's not like you could say, well, he was a fantastic roster builder, and for that reason, you can kind of overlook the issues that he's had with coaches. He was average to below average, quite frankly. And look, I think the Jaguars have an average to above average roster going into this thing. But with all the resources that he has poured into it and all the resources he's been given via Shad Khan being to write those big ass signing bonuses every single year for free agents and all the draft capital that they've had during his time here, I don't think that they've made the most of it. So I would say from a resources standpoint, Trent Baalke has been towards the top of the league in terms of trying to build a roster, but from an actual results of what those resources generated for the football team, for the personnel side of things, I would say they're only average to slightly above average, right? So I hope that makes sense. Like, he just has not made the most of the resources that he's had, and the process has generally been very confounding from ownership down for the Jaguars. But look, Trent Baalke's out. Doug Peterson's out. They now have a new coaching search on their hands, right? A coaching search that does not involve Trent Baalke, a general manager who coaches don't want to work with because of the track record, not only of losing, but of getting coaches fired and surviving, right? The backstabbing. Like, if you call up some of these guys he's worked with, you're going to hear the stories. And we've heard some of the stories. So we're going to take a look at some of the top coaching candidates the Jaguars now have in front of them. Yes, Ben Johnson is clearly off the table. In my mind, he was the only coach that the Jaguars were highly interested that is completely off the table now, including Liam Cohen, right? So we're going to continue to talk about this. We're going to take a look at my list of top coaches for this job at this point, because it's changed pretty drastically. And I've had a change of heart with one coach in particular. And we're also going to look at some potential general manager names that could be associated with those coaches coming in. So I'm excited to get into it. We don't know what the GM search is going to be, if there is going to be a GM search. Ethan Waugh is the interim GM right now. It would be very Shad Khan. It would follow his MO to just make Ethan Waugh the general manager. To not have, complete turnover is kind of Shad Khan's MO. So we'll see. It also needs to be stated, like, just because you've made connections with this head coach candidate and this potential GM candidate, football executive, that doesn't mean that pairing will happen. Like, your head coach does not have to have worked with your general manager in the past for them to come together and for those things to work. They do have to be aligned. They have to feel comfortable with the pairing, right? They have to be able to work together at an extremely high level and have each other's backs, have the same vision for the football team. But they don't have to have worked together in the past. But we're going to talk about these coaches and some pairings here today on the show. So really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. So my number one candidate is still Liam Cohen. Last time I checked, he's still an offensive coordinator. If Trent Baalke was the only thing, or the biggest thing, precluding Liam Cohen from potentially taking the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching job, that issue is no longer an issue. And he could potentially be the head coach. And we've talked ad nauseum about why we like Liam Cohen. I think he's a guy that has enough experience, both professionally, under Sean McVay as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coordinator, in college at Kentucky, making Will Levis look like a first-round prospect, making Baker Mayfield look like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, getting that running game going in Tampa. He's done so much over the last several years. I'm a huge fan of him, and I think that he's got the right vibes, the kind of chill attitude, but also very detail oriented that I think would pair well with Trevor Lawrence. And you look at what Shad and Trevor are looking for. They want a young offensive coordinator who's going to call plays. Liam Cohen would be that. I think you could look at a couple guys that have come up the ranks in LA with the Rams, where Liam Cohen spent 4 years as a coach, 3 as a offensive assistant, and then 1 as the offensive coordinator. James Gladstone and John McKay both were there with him. So either of those guys, which both of those guys are in personnel, you've got pro and in college scouting there. Both of those guys, I think, are going to end up having opportunities to be a general manager in this league at some point. And then you've also got Mike Greenberg, who is the assistant GM for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Been in Tampa a long time, been a part of Jason Licht building that roster out really well over a number of years, and he's the assistant GM there. So you've got a lot of cohesion with Liam Cohen over the last year. Obviously, they don't have as long a relationship as Liam Cohen would have with the Rams guys. But I think that's a few names to keep in mind with Liam Cohen if the Jaguars are saying, hey, we know you got a big check to be a nice offensive coordinator there in Tampa, but keys to the kingdom are yours here in Jacksonville, okay? And we're going to write you a much, much, much larger check, okay? Just move on up, 75, whatever you got to do to get up here. We'll help you get up here. Liam Cohen, I think, still should be the apple of the Jaguars' eye. Cliff Kingsbury, he's number 2 on my list. And I've done a lot of digging into more about Cliff Kingsbury since we talked about him last. And, going into Washington this year, I wasn't sold on Cliff Kingsbury and that whole plan, quite frankly. I didn't think they had a very talented offensive line. Thought, receiver-wise, obviously you have some decent tight ends, and Terry McLaurin's fantastic. I just wasn't in love with the entire plan there. But I'll tell you what, and I did like Jaden Daniels in the draft quite a bit. I had a true first-round grade on Daniels, but what they have done with that running game, and he's been really good with the run game creativity throughout his career, like they did that in Arizona as well. And then what he has done to elevate Jaden Daniels' game and accentuate what he does well and kind of mitigate some of the potential pitfalls that a rookie quarterback can have, I think has been absolutely fantastic. And Jaden Daniels is not the same type of quarterback as Trevor Lawrence, but I think you can do a lot of same things. Absolutely do. I think Cliff Kingsbury, with his mindset, what he's learned from going from a college head coach to being an NFL head coach in Arizona, having some success, but having that fall off down the stretch. And I think what he's learned since then, during his time on the job in Arizona, and then since then, especially from Dan Quinn, who's a fantastic leader, very good head coach. Yeah, I think that Cliff Kingsbury would be a good candidate. And I know Lance Newmark has been heavily tied to the Jets, but it looks like they're kind of weighing their options there. Lance Newmark is the second in command over in Washington for the Commanders. No pun intended there, but that landed well. So I think that's obviously someone he has a connection with via this past season. That they've done great things together. And Lance Newmark spent a lot of time in Detroit before that. But Cliff Kingsbury... So for me, Liam Cohen's in the top tier by himself. Then I have a tier of 2, and it's Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Brady, right? Cliff Kingsbury is at the top of that tier, but I think Joe Brady's right there with him. Brady doesn't have as much experience as Kingsbury. He does not. Kingsbury's been around a long time, even though he's still a fairly young guy. He's been around a long time, worked with a lot of different quarterbacks. Joe Brady, the success that he's had in the league and in college, is working with Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. Probably going to be successful. But I'll tell you what, he did more with both of those guys than anyone else has. And he's done more with that Buffalo Bills offense, getting the run game going at an extremely high level, keeping defenses off balance. I mean, Josh Allen winning a playoff game what was it, like 150 yards passing last week? That's great offense. That is great offense by Joe Brady, in my opinion. And I think he's a smart football mind. It's just like, how green is he? Does he have the preparedness, the readiness to lead an entire locker room, to lead an entire organization, to be the face of that? I don't know. But I would trust in his ability to lead the offense and find a good defensive coordinator who can lead that side, grow on the job. And then you've also got a potential connection with Brian Gain, who is the Bills' second in command under Brandon Beane. He's a guy that I think is in line for a GM job at some point for sure. Brian Gain. So I like that pairing quite a bit as well. Those are really the guys I'm fired up about. Liam Cohen, Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Brady. And if you asked me a month ago, 2 months ago about Cliff Kingsbury, I would have said no. Not super fired up, but doing more research on him and really diving into it, I think Cliff Kingsbury would be a fit here in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence and with this organization. So the rest of these guys, by no means do I think that they don't have a chance to succeed, but I'm in lockstep with Trevor. Like, I think it should be a young offensive guy you can really build around for a long time. And I know people say, you hear a lot of old heads talking about like, it needs to be the leader of men. Well, who's to say that a great offensive coordinator can't be a leader of men? And who's to say that a leader of men can find a great offensive coordinator and build a pipeline of great offense, right? You go out there and have a good season this year with Trevor Lawrence, there's a good chance that offensive coordinator is a head coach next year. So that's kind of how I look at it. And Trevor Lawrence and this offense, it's just the most important thing. And they're both sides of the ball are important. Special teams is important. It's all important. But if I'm going to place my value on one thing over the other, it's going to be offense. Bottom line. Now, going to get into the rest of this list. First, got to remind y'all about Underdog Fantasy. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code DuvalDaily, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. Maybe you want to take one of these star running backs to score a touchdown this upcoming week, championship weekend. Underdog has vulture protection to rescue your pick'em if your running back gets vultured. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code DuvalDaily to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783 or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Shout out to Underdog Fantasy. If you're supporting them, you're supporting us. So the rest of this list for me, Robert Saleh is next. And he's not a defensive guy. And there are a couple more offensive guys. So that kind of shows you it's not just about the offense for me. But when I look at how creative and how well orchestrated the offenses of Liam Cohen, Joe Brady, Cliff Kingsbury have been, that's why they rank ahead for me. And I think they also are in lockstep with what Trevor Lawrence is looking for. And look, I value what Trevor Lawrence thinks will be best for this football team. I do. But I also just happen to agree with him. Now, next is Robert Saleh. And Robert Saleh, for me, I think he's a good leader. I think he got a real raw deal in New York. I don't think that maybe that was the best market for him to have his first head coaching job. And maybe it's not the best market or infrastructure, ecosystem for anyone to have their first head coaching job. And I hope Aaron Glenn is able to break that cycle. But it's difficult in New York, especially not only with the media and the fans, but the owner is just flying off the rails, absolutely crazy, the way he handles business there. So I think Robert Saleh would be a good leader, hard worker, somebody that the locker room would respect, and somebody that would bring a great defensive mind to Jacksonville, and somebody who I think would be able to find a good offensive coach. I think, look, I think Nate Hackett and Aaron Rodgers, that was forced upon him, no doubt about it. Maybe he wasn't against Aaron Rodgers, right? But I don't think that he would have chosen Nate Hackett by himself. And then I think, Mike LaFleur was a good good choice. They just missed on Zach Wilson. And so, he's still very close with Matt LaFleur, probably still close with Mike LaFleur. Maybe they could have that pairing. I think that would be a solid situation for the Jaguars. And then Chad Alexander is a football executive. I would be really fired up. They worked together in New York, Robert Saleh and Chad Alexander. He's now with the Los Angeles Chargers. He spent a ton of time with the Ravens, and then you saw Joel Ortiz get his chance with the Chargers to be the GM, and Chad Alexander followed him over there. And I think that anytime you have an opportunity to potentially land somebody from a Ravens pipeline, coaching wise or front office, it's a good opportunity to take a look at some of those guys, because they have a tremendous culture over there about them in Baltimore. And I think that Chad Alexander, when he talks about transparency and talks about having one goal and making sure that everybody in the building feels that, I really like it. As he's talked about culture, and he said his culture is genuine transparency. So I like that a lot. Again, Robert Saleh not at the top of my list, but I think the Jaguars could do a lot worse. And I think that there's a chance, if Robert Saleh is the guy and he's able to go get a Mike LaFleur and maybe work with someone like Chad Alexander, the Jaguars could be headed in the right direction. The next guy on my list is Todd Monken, and he's obviously the Ravens offensive coordinator. He has a lot of experience in the league. Jaguars wide receivers coach once upon a time, but did great things with the Georgia Bulldogs offense, and then great things, took Lamar Jackson to new heights over the last couple years. And he's a creative offensive play caller. He's done a really good job adjusting to the different talents and skill sets that he's had over the years, again, at Georgia and with the Baltimore Ravens. And like I just mentioned, there's a lot of guys from the Ravens staff that could be in play if you went after Todd Monken. Monken is a little older. I think he's fun. I think he would be a good personality, but I don't know that he's like going to be as in tune with a Trevor Lawrence just from a genuine connection standpoint. But that's not the most necessary thing all the time, as long as you can properly get the most out of a quarterback in an offense. And I think Todd Monken has clearly done that. So he's a little bit down the list because he's older, because I don't know that he would have the same type of connection, but very good offensive play caller, offensive mind, interesting guy. You've got George Kokinis from the Ravens, who, not going to get into his backstory. He's done a tremendous job with the Ravens, did get an opportunity to be the Browns GM. That did not go well. There was some controversy, some drama there. Not going to go into it, but that's something to keep in mind. And then I also think Mark Azevedo has kind of risen up the ranks in Baltimore as well. So a couple guys that I would be keeping an eye on if Todd Monken was in play. And then my next two, I've got Kellen Moore. And I think Kellen gets a little bit too much flack. I don't think he has the most creative or dynamic passing game necessarily. I also think that there's limitations with the quarterback currently. And I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan, but he's not having the best time reading the field right now. I'll say that. And he's got a lot of talented players around him, but I think Kellen Moore would be an upgrade from what the Jaguars have had offensively the last couple years, but I don't know that he would be someone that would be putting them into the category of innovative, of creative. But I like him. And, could he poach someone from Philly from that front office? John Ferrari is the assistant GM there. Hell of a name. And Philly, that organization has done just an insane job from a roster construction standpoint for a very long time. And so Kellen Moore is interesting. And look, what we actually know right now is Patrick Graham interviewing today, Robert Saleh obviously interviewing as well. And then that's all we actually know. There's been scuttlebutt reporting rumors that the Jaguars are going to try to get back with Liam Cohen and see what happens there. I can check the Twitter timeline just to make sure there's no news there. Because, things have been pretty crazy the last 24 hours or so, if you have not been paying attention. Yeah, not seeing anything on that front just to make sure here. But yeah, so we know the only real interviews we know right now are Graham, which could be happening right now, and Robert Saleh. Obviously, some of these guys we've talked about are still coaching games in conference championship weekend. I don't think the Jaguars should be making a move until whether if they go get Liam Cohen, sure. But I mentioned Joe Brady and Cliff Kingsbury; they're still coaching. Um, I'd be very interested in being able to talk to those guys, Kellen Moore, and then the final guy is Patrick Graham. I think Patrick Graham is a great defensive coordinator, like great. I don't know what he's like as a leader, quite frankly. I'm not out on any of these guys. I think that all of them have a chance to be good head coaches in the league. I don't really know. He's he was with the Giants before the Raiders. Obviously, the Raiders had kind of a weird front office. Tom Telesco was there last year. I don't know if they established much of a connection. He was under David Gettleman in New York, so I don't really know much about Patrick Graham's background. I do know he's a great defensive coach. He's a game plan mastermind. Like he can do a really good job bringing in a game plan week to week. But I don't know much beyond that about Patrick Graham. So that's kind of my list right now. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Y'all have a good one.